Bob Marley, One Love, directed by Reinaldo Marcus Green, stars Kingsley Ben-Adir as Bob Marley. The film follows a period of Marley's life as he's making music and goes through many struggles as he becomes more and more popular. I'm usually very iffy when it comes to music biopics. A lot of the time, they never end up being very good. The few good ones that come to mind always are films like Walk the Line, a biopic on Johnny Cash, and Control, a biopic on Joy Division. And then you have the shitty ones like Bohemian Rhapsody. Thankfully, Bob Marley One Love doesn't fall into the category of the latter, but it just barely stretches the ability to be truly great. I'll get most of the good things out of the way. This film is very well acted. Ben-Adir does a really great job as Marley. His speaking voice for him is basically spot on. I think there's one or two occasions where he himself is singing, but for most of the film it's one of these situations where it's the original versions of the song being played as Ben-Adir is lip syncing over them. Lashana Lynch was pretty good also. My main issue is that for most of the movie she has a good purpose, but the writers couldn't help themselves by turning her character into the stereotypical unsatisfied wife that we see in all these music biopics. Her reasons for being unhappy also seem to be really glossed over, perhaps in terms to keep the overall narrative of the film in check. So that was definitely a pretty disappointing thing to see. The film is shot really well. It's got some good cinematography and lighting choices. It's definitely really colorful, and I appreciate the effort that was made into carefully choosing the colors for all of their respective scenes. It breathed a good bit of life into the overall picture. Its usage of songs were really well thought out too. There isn't a massive moment where a song is formed and it turns into a really corny scene. The closest thing to that is seeing the creation of Exodus. Thankfully, it's done in a way that's a little more believable than other biopics would try and handle this kind of moment. Now to move on to, I think, my main issue with this film. I don't think the movie is paced very well at all. It somehow manages to take a film that's only an hour 45 minutes into a film that feels like 3 hours, and not in a sense that makes me never want to leave this world in which the film was created. It's more quite the opposite. Towards the middle part of this movie is where it starts to drag, which is a shame because for the first 30 to 40 minutes I do actually think the film starts off strong. When we see the type of things Bob has to deal with, as the violence in Jamaica rolls quickly every day, and the assassination attempt on him happens. We've been with him and the people in his life long enough, thankfully, for us to care about what's happening, even if we know the outcome in the end. Towards the end, there's a montage that seems to cover both the tour and certain parts of his personal life, which I feel like was handled pretty poorly. It just looks like, from the way it's edited, there's so much information here that it's not enough time to soak in at all. I genuinely think with everything that was being covered, it would be worthy of at least 30 minutes of film. Once we get to the end of the film, there's a moment that happens where instead of recreating it on screen, they choose to cut to real footage. I don't mind them showing real footage, but it was just jarring. It felt like that's what the whole movie was building up to, and they just don't decide to recreate it. I feel like for the narrative of the film, it would have been better for them to just recreate it, but that wasn't the case here. I feel like there's times in this where the film feels very vapid. It's structured in a way where we don't get a fully in-depth look into the life of Bob Marley. It's more of a surface level explanation of why he was so popular and how he brought people together, but besides glimpses of such a thing, we never really see how his music is so powerful to unite people. And the film treats this as if it's information the audience would already know, so they don't have to showcase it. I feel like for audiences who aren't familiar with Marley and his work, it sucks for them, because they're essentially getting the bullet points of the impact of his career. While it's not a bad thing, it definitely could have been handled worse. I get it gives audiences an opportunity to reach out and seek that information for themselves. I guess at the end of the day, the film left me wanting more. Overall, I think this film could have been better. There were lots of components here to make it really good, but I feel like there wasn't enough done to really convey to the audience why Marley's music is so revered, and if you're trying to get that point across to an audience, you need to find a creative way to do that. Otherwise, like what happens here, it will just feel like a slog to sit through. But at the same time, it's not as bad as I was expecting, as there's still some really entertaining moments here. I'm giving Bob Marley One Love 3 stars. It's very competently made and really well acted. I just feel like there's some fat that could have been chopped down, and yet it also felt like it could have offered so much more. Not exactly half-assed, but a bit more passion could have made this film even greater than what we got.